Chapter 1. The Ghost of Fortune. Captain Damian Cross stood on the deck of the Widow's Vengeance, his steel-gray eyes scanning the horizon like a predator searching for prey. The Caribbean sun beat down mercilessly, but his black coat remained buttoned to the throat, concealing the scars that mapped his chest like a constellation of pain. For 5 years, he had been the most feared pirate in these waters, and for 5 years, he had felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of revenge. The merchant vessel Lady Catherine had surrendered without firing a shot, as most ships did when they saw his black flag, with its distinctive silver skull crowned with thorns. His reputation preceded him like a shadow. Captain Cross took what he wanted and left no survivors to tell tales. What the world didn't know was that beneath the ruthless pirate exterior lay the broken remains of Damian Ashworth, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune worth $300 million. "Captain," his first mate Tobias called out, "the prisoners are secured below deck." Damian nodded curtly. He'd grown tired of pleasantries, tired of pretending to care about anything beyond the next raid. The merchant ship had been carrying luxury goods bound for Spanish nobles, silk, spices, and jewelry that would fetch a handsome price in Port Royal. But as he surveyed his latest prize, something felt different about this capture. "How many?" he asked, though he typically didn't bother with such details. 7 crew members and 3 passengers, sir. 2 merchants and—" Tobias hesitated. A woman. Something flickered in Damian's chest, a sensation he'd thought dead for half a decade. He crushed it immediately. Passengers mean ransom money. Secure them properly and set course for Tortuga. As the Widow's Vengeance sailed away from the burning merchant vessel, Damian retreated to his cabin, a space that would have impressed any gentleman's club in London. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, and leather-bound books lined mahogany shelves. The only hint of his pirate life was the arsenal of weapons mounted on the walls, and the portrait of a woman with kind brown eyes that he could never bring himself to remove. Elena Ashworth had been his anchor to humanity, his reason for building a legitimate empire instead of taking what he wanted by force. She'd died in his arms 5 years ago, victim of a plague that his own company's medicine could have prevented, if his business partners hadn't been selling diluted vaccines to increase profits while people died. The night he'd buried Elena, Damian Ashworth had died with her. What rose from that grave was something darker, hungrier for justice that the law couldn't provide. He'd used his vast resources to outfit the finest pirate ship in the Caribbean, recruited the most skilled cutthroats, and began systematically destroying everyone who had profited from his wife's death. A knock at his cabin door interrupted his brooding. "Enter." Tobias stepped inside, his weathered face troubled. "Captain, about the woman prisoner, there's something you should know." "What is it?" Damian's voice carried the edge that had made seasoned pirates step carefully around him. "She's requesting to speak with you personally. Claims she has information about the Ashworth pharmaceutical scandal." The words hit Damian like a physical blow. No one should know that name, that connection. He'd been meticulous in covering his tracks, creating Captain Cross from thin air, while ensuring Damian Ashworth simply vanished from public record. "Bring her to me," he said quietly. "And Tobias, if this is some elaborate trap, I'll hold you personally responsible." Minutes later, the cabin door opened again, and Damian felt his carefully constructed world shift on its axis. The woman who entered was nothing like the pampered aristocrat he'd expected. She wore simple traveling clothes, now salt-stained and torn, but her posture remained proud despite her circumstances. Dark hair framed an intelligent face marked by determination rather than fear, and her violet eyes met his without flinching. "Captain Cross," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Though I suspect you prefer your given name, Damian Ashworth." Damian's hand instinctively moved to the pistol at his side. "That name means nothing to me. It should, just as mine should mean something to you." She straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm Dr. Sophia Hartwell, the whistleblower who exposed the vaccine scandal that destroyed your company, the woman whose testimony sent your business partners to prison." The room seemed to spin around Damian, as memories crashed over him like a rogue wave. Dr. Sophia Hartwell. He'd seen her name in countless newspaper articles. The crusading physician who'd brought down his empire while he'd been too consumed with grief to defend it. She'd been the final nail in the coffin of his former life. "You," he whispered, his voice carrying 5 years of accumulated rage. "You destroyed everything I built." "I exposed the truth," she replied firmly. "Those vaccines were killing children while your partners counted profits. Someone had to speak up." My wife died because of that scandal. The company she'd helped build crumbled, and with it, any chance of finding real cures for the disease that took her. Sophia's expression softened slightly. Your wife died because corrupt executives prioritized profit over human lives. I read about Elena Ashworth, Mr. Ashworth. She was working on legitimate medical research before the corruption consumed your company. She would have wanted the truth exposed. The mention of Elena's name from this woman's lips sent fury coursing through Damien's veins. In one swift motion, he crossed the cabin and grabbed Sophia by the shoulders, his face inches from hers. Don't you dare speak her name, he growled. You have no right. I have every right, Sophia interrupted, her violet eyes blazing with matching intensity. Because unlike everyone else who profited from that corruption, I've spent the last 5 years trying to fix what was broken. While you became a pirate seeking revenge, I've been developing actual cures for the diseases your company failed to treat. Damien stared at her, his grip loosening despite himself. This woman, this prisoner, was nothing like what he'd expected. She wasn't cowering or begging for mercy. Instead, she was challenging him, forcing him to confront truths he'd spent 5 years avoiding. Why were you on that merchant ship? He asked, stepping back but keeping his eyes locked on hers. Because someone's been hunting me, Sophia replied. Someone who doesn't want my research to see the light of day. Someone with enough power to corrupt officials and enough money to hire assassins. I was fleeing to safety when your ship appeared. As Damien absorbed this information, he realized that Dr. Sophia Hartwell might be the most dangerous prisoner he'd ever taken. Not because she threatened his life, but because she threatened something far more precious. The carefully constructed wall around his heart. Chapter 2. Healing Wounds. The brig of the Widow's Vengeance had been designed to hold dangerous men, not brilliant women with medical degrees and inconvenient truths. Damien found himself making excuses to walk past the holding area, drawn by glimpses of Sophia working with improvised materials from her confiscated medical bag. She'd somehow convinced Tobias to let her treat a crew member's infected wound, and the result had been nothing short of miraculous. She's got the hands of an angel, Captain, the recovered pirate had told him. Saved my arm, she did. Maybe my life. Now, 3 days after her capture, Damien stood outside her cell watching as she carefully examined another crew member's chronic pain. Her touch was gentle but professional, her questions thorough. It reminded him painfully of Elena, who had possessed the same healing instinct. The inflammation in your joints suggests a deficiency in your diet, Sophia was explaining to the grizzled sailor. If Captain Cross would allow me access to the galley, I could prepare a remedy using ingredients you likely have on board. The captain don't care about crew comfort, the man replied, wincing as he flexed his arthritic fingers. Perhaps he cares more than you think, Sophia said quietly, her eyes finding Damien through the bars. That evening, Damien found himself unlocking her cell and escorting her to his cabin for dinner, a courtesy he'd never extended to a prisoner before. She sat across from him at his mahogany table, her violet eyes taking in the luxury that surrounded them. This isn't what I expected from a pirate's quarters, she observed, her gaze lingering on Elena's portrait. I'm not what anyone expects, Damien replied, pouring wine into crystal glasses that had once graced his London penthouse. No, you're not. Sophia accepted the wine but barely touched it. You're Damien Ashworth, whose pharmaceutical research was revolutionizing tropical disease treatment. You funded hospitals in 3 countries and employed some of the world's most brilliant scientists. The man I investigated wasn't evil. He was absent. Absent? The word stung more than any accusation of malice. Consumed with grief. While your wife was dying and you were caring for her, your business partners were systematically corrupting everything you'd built. They used your isolation and your trust against you. Sophia leaned forward, her expression earnest. You were a victim too, Mr. Ashworth. Just a very wealthy, very angry victim. Damien set down his wineglass with deliberate care. You think understanding my motivation excuses 5 years of piracy? I think understanding your motivation explains why you became a pirate who's never killed an innocent person, why your crew receives the best medical care possible, why you fund an orphanage in Port Royal under an assumed name. Sophia's smile was gentle but knowing. Did you think I wouldn't research the infamous Captain Cross before accusing him of being Damien Ashworth? The revelation that she knew about his charitable activities sent a shock through Damien's system. He'd been so careful to keep those acts of conscience separate from his pirate persona. Those children needed help, he said quietly. And you provided it, just as you've provided for your crew's welfare, just as you've avoided unnecessary bloodshed in every raid. Sophia's voice grew softer. You're not the monster you pretend to be, Damien. You're a man in pain who's forgotten how to heal. Don't psychoanalyze me, doctor. Then don't pretend you're something you're not. She stood and moved to Elena's portrait, studying the painted face with professional interest. She was beautiful and kind. From what I've read about her charitable work, she was everything good in my world, Damien admitted, his defenses cracking despite his best efforts. What would she think of what you've become? The question hit him like a cutlass to the chest. Elena had been the moral compass of their relationship, always pushing him to use his wealth and influence for good. The thought of her seeing him now, leading a crew of pirates and living outside the law, filled him with shame he'd been suppressing for years. She'd be disappointed, he whispered. Would she? Or would she see a man so devastated by loss that he stopped believing in the goodness she loved about him? Sophia turned back to him, her violet eyes gentle with understanding. Grief doesn't make you a monster, Damien, but it can make you forget who you really are. Over the following days, their evening conversations became a routine that Damien found himself anticipating with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Sophia shared stories of her medical missions, her research into tropical diseases, and her ongoing efforts to develop affordable treatments for the world's poorest populations. In return, Damien found himself talking about Elena, about the empire they'd built together, about dreams that had died with her. She wanted to eradicate yellow fever, he said one evening as they walked the ship's deck under a canopy of stars. We were so close to a breakthrough when she got sick. The research continued after your company's collapse, Sophia said quietly. Other scientists built on her work. There's been significant progress. Really? For the first time in years, Damien felt a spark of something other than anger or grief. Really? In fact, some of my current research builds on foundations she established. Sophia stopped walking and turned to face him. She may be gone, Damien, but her legacy isn't. Neither is yours, if you choose to reclaim it. Standing there in the moonlight, with this remarkable woman looking at him as if he were still capable of good, Damien felt the first crack in the ice that had encased his heart since Elena's death. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because someone is trying to destroy my research the same way they destroyed your company. Because I need help from someone who understands how these people operate. And because... She hesitated, then met his gaze directly. Because I see the man you used to be beneath the pirate you've become. And that man is worth saving. As the widow's vengeance sailed through the Caribbean night, Damien realized that Dr. Sophia Hartwell had done something no enemy or storm had managed. She'd made him want to live again, not just exist in a state of perpetual revenge, but wanting to live and knowing how to do it were two very different things. Chapter 3. Dangerous Alliances. The attack came at dawn, when the mist still clung to the water like ghostly fingers. 3 naval vessels emerged from the fog with the precision of a military operation, their British flags snapping in the morning breeze. But Damien's experienced eye caught details that made his blood run cold. These weren't Royal Navy ships enforcing maritime law. They were privateers with legitimate papers, flying false colors. "Captain!" Tobias bellowed from the crow's nest. "They're flying the Blackwood Company colors beneath the Union Jack." Damien felt his world tilt. The Blackwood Company had been one of his former business partners, the pharmaceutical giant that had profited most from the vaccine scandal. If they were hunting Sophia with armed ships, her research posed a more significant threat than he'd realized. "Battle stations," he roared, but his mind was already calculating odds. 3 ships to 1, superior firepower, and they held the weather gauge. The widow's vengeance was fast and well-armed, but not equipped for a pitched battle against overwhelming force. Sophia appeared at his side, her face pale but determined. "This is my fault. They followed me to you." "How?" Damien demanded, even as he maneuvered his ship toward the protection of a nearby reef system. "I don't know. I was careful. I changed routes. She stopped, her hand flying to the small pendant at her throat. Oh God, the locket. With shaking fingers, she opened the delicate piece of jewelry, revealing not a photograph, but a tiny electronic device. "They gave me this as a keepsake when I left the research facility," said it contained a holographic image of their logo as a memento. "It's a tracker," Damien said grimly. "They've been following you across the Caribbean." The first cannonball screamed overhead, splashing into the water just off their starboard bow. A warning shot, but the next volley would be aimed to kill. "There's something you need to know," Sophia said urgently, as Damien's crew prepared for battle. "My research isn't just about tropical diseases. I've developed a universal vaccine base that could revolutionize medicine, make it impossible for companies to profit from diluted or counterfeit drugs. It would save millions of lives and cost pharmaceutical giants billions in profits. And Blackwood wants to bury it. They want to steal it, control it, turn my life's work into another profit center. Her violet eyes blazed with anger. I'd rather die than let that happen. Damien looked at this remarkable woman, brilliant, principled, willing to die for her convictions, and felt something shift inside his chest. She reminded him not just of Elena's compassion, but of the man he'd once been, the man who'd believed medicine should heal rather than exploit. "You won't die today," he said firmly. "I promise you that." The battle that followed was unlike anything in Damien's piratical career. This wasn't about treasure or revenge. It was about protecting something genuinely precious. He pushed the Widow's vengeance through maneuvers that would have been impossible for a larger vessel, using the reef system's treacherous waters to his advantage. But the enemy ships were relentless, and their captains knew these waters as well as he did. Gradually, they began herding him toward deeper water, where their superior firepower would prove decisive. "Captain," Tobias called out. "We're taking on water. That last hit cracked our hull below the waterline." Damien assessed their situation with the cold calculation that had kept him alive for 5 years. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and now taking damage faster than they could repair it. In perhaps an hour, they would be overwhelmed. "There's another option," Sophia said quietly, moving close enough that only he could hear her. "Let me surrender myself to them. It's me they want." "Absolutely not. Damien, listen to me. Your crew doesn't deserve to die for my research. You don't deserve to die for it." Her hand touched his arm. "This is my fight." "Like hell it is." Damien's voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded both corporate boardrooms and pirate ships. "Tobias, signal the men. We're making for Devil's Triangle." Every member of his crew went silent. Devil's Triangle was a maze of underwater caves and hidden passages known only to the most experienced Caribbean pirates. It was treacherous waters where many ships had been lost, but it also offered the possibility of escape if you knew the secret routes. "Are you insane?" Sophia asked as cannon fire erupted around them. "You'll kill us all." "Maybe, but I'd rather die trying to save you than live knowing I'd abandoned you to those bastards." Damien's steel-gray eyes met her violet ones. "Besides, I know these waters better than anyone. My wife and I used to sail here during our honeymoon." What followed was a harrowing chase through waters that seemed determined to claim them. Jagged rocks rose from the depths like teeth, and underwater currents threatened to dash them against hidden reefs. But Damien navigated by memory and instinct, following routes he'd explored with Elena during happier times. The pursuing ships fell back as they entered the most dangerous waters, unwilling to risk their vessels in pursuit of a single pirate. But just as Damien began to believe they'd escaped, disaster struck. A hidden coral formation, shifted by recent storms, tore through their hull like claws. The Widow's vengeance began taking on water faster than they could pump it out, listing dangerously to starboard. "Abandon ship," Damien commanded, but his heart was breaking. This vessel had been his home, his sanctuary, his weapon of vengeance for 5 years. As his crew took to the boats, Sophia remained at his side. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Your ship, your life, I've destroyed everything." "You've saved everything that matters," Damien replied, helping her into the last lifeboat. "For the first time in 5 years, I remember what I'm living for." As they watched the Widow's vengeance slip beneath the waves, Damien realized that the ship's destruction might be the beginning of something new rather than an ending. The man who'd built an empire of healing was still alive beneath the pirate's exterior. He just needed to remember how to let him surface. But first, they had to survive long enough for that transformation to matter. Chapter 4. Love's Resurrection. The hidden cove on San Cristobal had served as a pirate's sanctuary for over a century, its narrow entrance concealed by jagged rocks and overhanging vegetation. Damien's crew had managed to salvage enough supplies from the Widow's vengeance to establish a temporary camp, but everyone knew their situation was precarious. Without a ship, they were stranded, and the Blackwood Company's hunters would eventually find them. Sophia had transformed a sea cave into a makeshift laboratory, using salvaged equipment and improvised materials to continue her work. Damien found her there as dawn broke over the Caribbean, bent over notes by lamplight with the intensity of someone racing against time. "You've been working all night," he observed, setting down a cup of coffee beside her. "They'll find us soon," she replied without looking up. I need to complete the vaccine synthesis before that happens. If I can perfect the formula and document the process, even if they capture me, other scientists could replicate my work. Damien studied her profile in the golden morning light, the determined set of her jaw, the gentle curve of her neck, the way she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear when concentrating. Somewhere during their harrowing escape, his feelings for her had evolved beyond mere attraction or admiration into something deeper and more dangerous. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. This time she did look up, her violet eyes reflecting the lamp's flickering flame. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what you said, about the man I used to be, about what Elena would think of who I've become." He sat down beside her on the rocky ledge she'd converted into a work surface. "You're right. I lost myself in grief and anger, but that doesn't mean I can't find my way back. Damien, let me finish, please." He took her hands in his, noting how delicate they seemed despite their strength and skill. "I've sent word to contacts in London, Geneva, and New York. People who remember Damien Ashworth and what he stood for. If we can get your research to them, they'll think you're dead. The world believes Captain Cross and Damien Ashworth are different people. Then it's time for Captain Cross to die so Damien Ashworth can live again." His grip on her hands tightened. "I want to help you, Sophia, not as a pirate seeking revenge, but as a man who remembers why medicine matters." Before she could respond, Tobias appeared at the cave entrance. "Captain, ships on the horizon. 5 of them this time, and they're flying Blackwood colors." Damien felt Sophia's hands tremble in his. 5 ships meant they were facing a private navy, not just a pursuit force. The Blackwood Company was done taking chances. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Maybe 2 hours before they spot the cove, less if they have local pilots." As Tobias disappeared to organize the crew's defenses, Damien turned back to Sophia. Her face had gone pale, but her eyes still held determination. "There's something I haven't told you," she said quietly, "about why Blackwood wants my research so badly." "What?" "It's not just a universal vaccine base. It's also a diagnostic tool that can detect counterfeit or diluted medications. If released, it would expose decades of fraud across multiple pharmaceutical companies. Billions of dollars in profits. Thousands of executives who've gotten rich selling ineffective drugs to desperate people." Damien felt a familiar rage building, but this time it was focused and purposeful rather than blind and consuming. "They've been murdering people for profit. For years. And now they know I have proof." Sophia's voice grew stronger. "That's why I can't let them catch me, Damien. This isn't about my life anymore. It's about millions of lives that could be saved if the truth comes out." The sound of approaching cannon fire echoed across the water, closer than Tobias had estimated. The hunters had found them sooner than expected. "There's a way," Damien said suddenly, his mind racing through possibilities. "The old smuggler's tunnel that connects this cove to the inland caves. If we could get you out through there, I won't abandon your crew, and I won't let you sacrifice yourself for nothing." Damien stood, pulling her to her feet. "But there's a third option, something that requires both the pirate's cunning and the businessman's resources." What happened next would be remembered in Caribbean legend as the Battle of San Cristobal Cove, but those who witnessed it knew it was really about love conquering fear. Damien had spent 5 years as Captain Cross, learning every trick of pirate warfare and naval strategy. Now he combined that knowledge with Damien Ashworth's vast resources and connections. The first phase involved a carefully orchestrated deception. Using signal flags and staged explosions, they made it appear that Sophia had been killed in a desperate last stand. Blackwood's forces, convinced their target was dead, relaxed their aggressive posture just enough to create an opening. The second phase required a sacrifice Damien had never imagined making. Using a secret communication device he'd kept from his Ashworth days, he contacted his former business rivals, the legitimate pharmaceutical companies that had been competing with Blackwood for decades. The message was simple: detailed information about Blackwood's illegal activities in exchange for protection and resources to expose the truth. As Blackwood's ships prepared to storm the cove, 3 vessels flying different flags appeared on the horizon. These weren't pirates or privateers. They were corporate security ships funded by Blackwood's competitors, armed with lawyers instead of cannons and accompanied by international maritime authorities. The battle that followed was fought with documents and jurisdictional claims, rather than gunpowder and steel. By sunset, Blackwood's executives were in custody, their illegal activities exposed to media organizations across 3 continents. But the real victory came when Sophia emerged from the caves, her research intact and her safety guaranteed by international treaty. She walked across the beach toward Damien with tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from relief. "You did it," she said as she reached him. "You saved everyone." "We did it," Damien corrected, pulling her into his arms. "And I finally understand what Elena would have wanted. Not revenge for her death, but action to prevent other deaths." Their kiss was interrupted by Tobias clearing his throat loudly. "Begging your pardon, Captain, but there's a question of what happens now. The crew's wonderin' if we're still pirates, or if we're something else entirely." Damien looked at his men, rogues and outcasts who'd followed him through 5 years of questionable choices, but had proven their loyalty when it mattered most. Then he looked at Sophia, whose brilliant mind and compassionate heart had reminded him who he used to be, and who he could become again. "We're going to be something new," he announced. "The Ashworth Foundation for Medical Research will need security for its vessels carrying supplies to remote areas. Pirates make excellent security consultants. We know all the tricks." 6 months later, Dr. Sophia Hartwell Ashworth stood on the deck of the New Horizon, watching her husband direct the unloading of medical supplies at a clinic in Haiti. The universal vaccine they'd developed together had already saved thousands of lives, and the diagnostic technology was revolutionizing healthcare in developing nations. "Any regrets about marrying a reformed pirate?" Damien asked, joining her at the ship's rail. "Only that it took 5 years for us to find each other," Sophia replied, her hand finding his, "though I suppose we both needed to become who we were meant to be first." As the Caribbean sun set over waters that had once been his hunting grounds, Damien reflected on the strange journey that had led him from grief to vengeance to redemption. Elena's portrait now hung in their cabin beside Sophia's. 2 women who'd taught him that the greatest treasure wasn't gold or revenge, but the courage to heal rather than harm. The most feared pirate in the Caribbean had become something far more dangerous, a man with unlimited resources who genuinely cared about making the world better. And beside him stood the woman who'd reminded him that some prisoners were meant to free their captors rather than be freed by them. The end.